right, so officially, welcome everyone. We're here again with one of my favorite independent bottlers, tasting through the new set of whiskies that have just landed in Australia. If you guys were here for the last tasting, I have this Maltbarn towel that I have no idea how I got my hands on, and I tried to find it again for today, but because I do actually use it, it's gone missing. So hopefully I'll have it for the next one, Martin. But I feel like every time we have a malt barn tasting, I feel I'm reminded of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Don't forget your towel. But no, I absolutely adore Malt Barn ever since I started working at Whiskey Nail. So I'm very excited to be joined tonight again by the wonderful Martin Diekmann, who's the founder of Malt Barn. And he'll talk us through these whiskies. And also hiding away in the corner is Ben Mitchell, who's the importer and distributor of them into Australia, and also the legend behind Moreish Wines, which has, I think, more whiskey than wine at this point, right?
It's 50-50.
Getting there. Before I hand it over, I'll just do our little housekeeping. You guys might have seen our virtual tasting housekeeping video that we share in the Zoom link email. It goes over the usual pointers of if you've got 6 glasses, great. If you don't, no stress. Don't drink and drive is obviously the most important recommendation that we have. We encourage responsible drinking here. If you haven't had the chance to watch the video, please do, or if you need a refresher, it's always there on our YouTube channel. As always, we love to see your tasting notes and questions in the chat. Please pop them in. I particularly love reading your tasting notes. They always make me feel a little less crazy when I think of how a whiskey tastes. So yes, please pop all of those in the chat and I'll read them out as we go. And I'm going to go through the tasting order verbally, just quickly for the people at home watching back. Whiskey number 1 is the Glen Elgin. Number 2 is the Ila Jura. 3 is the Glen 4 is the Ben Nevis. 5 is the Bruichladdich, and 6 is the Caol Ila. But that's enough for me. That's out of the way now. So let's tuck into whiskey number 1, the Glen Elgin, and Martin can tell us a little bit about how Malt Barn started. I know we've got a few new faces in the tasting today. So we can do a short recap and then we can get into what I'm truly excited to talk about, which is the amazing 70s design of these bottle labels. But we'll start with the story of the brand first.
Yes, good evening, everybody. My name is Martin, for those of you who don't know me. Thank you very much for having me and for participating in this tasting. I'm the founder and actually the only person working at Maltbarn. Maltbarn started in 2010 or 2011, probably in 2011, and it's my brainchild. I live in a big farm where I have a big barn attached to that as well. So the name was, actually the name was showing up pretty quickly, and I had the chance to buy a couple of casks, and that's how it all started, really. April will see new releases already, which will show up at yours in probably May, June, the latest, I think. And those will be the numbers 250 to 260. So it's quite a few releases now, and I'm doing pretty much only whiskey with the odd cognac or armagnac in between. Yeah, it's a full-time job. My wife is a teacher, and teachers are state employed in Germany, so she brings in the safe money, and I can do all sorts of ridiculous things or bring in the extra stuff. So my idea is that I only release what I like. That's probably what everybody says. And it's probably true for everybody. But anyways, I I'm not very good at selling stuff that I don't like, so I make sure I really do like it. Otherwise, it's just gathering dust with me. New releases, as I said, will be out in April, which is the time for Limburg Whiskey Fair, which is one of the oldest fairs in Europe. And that's my main whiskey fair in the year, so I make sure that I always release something then. And it will have different labels again, not the 70s series, because I think that's probably going to get boring. Up until last year, I worked with a lot of photos, and I wanted to go back to that this year, but I will not. There's a different design again, but maybe I'll come back to the photos later. So if there's no well, if there are questions, just go and ask. Otherwise, I'd go for the first whiskey, which, as Emma said, is Glen Elgin, relatively young Glen Elgin, at least for my taste or for my releases. I started off with only 25 or older whiskies, which is pretty hard to do nowadays. So I altered my release policy a little, but still I like, for the most part, I will have refill casks and bourbon and sherry only. There's hardly a wine cask or anything. There will be a Madeira cask probably next year, but I can't say anything more about that. Other than that, it's bourbon and sherry, and this Glen Elgin is a bourbon cask, 16 years old, 52%. And for those of you who have not tried it, please go ahead.
We've had a few people already digging themselves into it. Leah saying fresh pine shavings, floral undertones, candied orange peel, and honeyed malt. Brendan had a great call. The honeydew melon is absolutely, it's that bright, like honeydew melon kind of amazing quality to it. Apple
Yeah.
nose, yummy, water not needed, but it takes well. Michael, quite fresh on the nose, grassy notes, red honey, citrus peel. Yeah, just like I instantly was like, oh, I feel like I'm drinking, a it's lemonade or like really lovely bright soda that just when it gets up your nose and it tickles, that lovely kind of quality to it there. And we were obviously talking about the 70s labels and Leo was obviously very excited by them being himself, but
Yeah, it was a coincidence. As I said, normally I work with photos. Um, I uh, I had several series with old family photos or a local photographer and a British photographer, and this just came. I don't know. I just looked things up on the internet, and then I saw these 70s designs, and they were so, yeah, they looked so interesting. But of course, I think you can only do it like, for a certain amount of time or for a certain amount of labels. And I had the idea to start off with something like 80s or 90s, but none of these really work. 70s are just something special in a way. But yeah, I mean, of course, it's a question of taste. Many people came up and said, "Ooh, that's great, and I love it, and it's refreshing and all." And others came up and said, "Ooh, you are destroying my series. Really, I mean, I've got all the bottles on the wall, and now they look completely different. What am I going to do?" So you can't make it, good for everybody, really. But hey, anyway, the good thing when you do it, I'm my own boss, so I can pretty much do whatever I want as long as I, write single malt Scotch whiskey in the right, font size and all that. So what I would like to add to the Elgin is that I think it's quite dry. It's sweet, but it has a dry sweetness. But it's so I think you have to like dry whiskey, which is, well, I think it's, well, of course, I think it's nice, but what am I to say? So yeah,
yeah,
nice one.
super cool. I agree with Travis as well. I don't know what a 90s label would look like. Probably way more fluorescent colors than any eye should ever see in one bottle, but or just like I think of the trauma of the fashion of those ages. I will say you could go back even later. I there's a house for sale in my street and I went inside and was amazed by the original 1960s wallpaper. So it's like just these
Oh yes.
beautiful
Oh,
like designs and images and I've like sent a letter to the new owner. The kitchen was the one that just really sent me. This is
wow.
the
Yeah,
memories. the trauma as well, I think. But yeah, I think go back even further. Why not? That'd be really fun. But
Yeah, you only have to wait for a certain time, and then it gets modern again, or
exactly,
it gets fashionable again. Yeah, true.
100%. Yeah.
So
I
I can
love,
probably say something about. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, no, go for it.
I can probably say something about the cask, the way I choose casks. There's different methods. Sometimes, whenever possible, I try to taste before I buy. That's not always possible. It gets better again, but for a certain time, it wasn't very easy. And my policy is if I can't try it before I buy it, sometimes when they're cheap, casks are cheap enough, I buy them, and then I try them as soon as possible. All the casks are in Scotland. Uh, you have to you have to store and bottle all the whiskey in Scotland. Otherwise, it's not Scotch whiskey anymore. It was different until a couple of years ago, but now you have to bottle and label as well in Scotland. So I will try as soon as possible when I have to buy something blind, and then I see what I do. There's some casks I resell them again when I see it or when I think I can't make anything out of it. Sometimes I just re-rack them. Sometimes I just leave them for a couple of years. That's a thing of experience. Most of the time, experience works in this. Sometimes there are surprises, and you realize after a year or two, well, they are not developing as quickly as I want to, or whatever. So I have good contacts to the warehouses I work with. I can always get samples, or I can always go there, or they re-rack. I can send empty casks to them, or they will get empty casks for me. So yeah, it's just I can do pretty much whatever I want. It's just a question of deciding what you want to do with it. And this next, are we ready for the next one already?
Yes, I was just gonna say
Okay.
we'll pop onto the
Okay.
Isle of Jura, which is
And this next one is a
outside of
is an example for a cask that was that I think was perfect right from the beginning. This is a very well, I think it's strange in a way, and I'm very curious to see what you will say. Um, uh, for me, it was a real surprise, I have to say, and it seems that it was like that. That's true for everybody else as well, because pretty much everybody said, okay, but what is it really? It can't be Jura. But as far as I can say, it is Jura. At least that's what the cask read. So the 10-year-old Jura bourbon, pretty sure a first full bourbon, I think. Um, and I think this is just really, really good for a 10-year-old. It has no strange notes. Jura's pretty famous for its strange notes, or you can't really say what is typical for Jura because you can get everything really. And this is very, very straight, very well matured 10-year-old for my taste.
Yeah, we were having this discussion before I let everyone into the Zoom, and I was sort of like, I'm really curious about this one because I know that I have a penchant for enjoying Dura when it's 20 years or older. Like I find
Mhm.
that, I'm not as confident or keen about it when it's at that younger age. So I was just like, oh, don't know how this one's gonna go. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It is very it's unusual, it's light. It reminds me a lot of those like beautiful, fruity, malty Speyside drams. Just like white grapes. I just get like a lot of white grape and those kinds of acids on the nose and the palate as well. And Mirko's tasting notes are minties soaked in charred pineapple juice, which I kind of love.
Wow.
Yeah, I think for me the standout tasting note for a young juror was always this like this sourdough kind of profile, and it takes on a lot of like, it takes a while for it to take on a bold flavor profile, but this is very, very good. Like, this must have been quite the find. Did you uh what at what age did you get this cask, and like how long do you
Actually,
have it?
I bought it and bottled it immediately. That's something I cannot always do, or not very often do very often. This was really the only question I had, or I thought about, was why didn't why do they come up with such a cask? Why didn't anybody else bottle it yet? This is I didn't do nothing with it. I just bought it,
Well,
which is great.
that's, that's convenient. That's a good turnaround on that. Um,
Yeah, true.
yeah, I think most people are kind of uh I mean, raise your hands if you're also like kind of, not the hesitant about Jura, or like, or if you're a big Jura fan, raise your hand, or for you there, yeah.
Okay.
Um, I know Travis said, I'm going to say something I've never said before. It's a very good Jura, a very good 10-year-old Jura. It's excellent.
So,
Leo's,
for those of you who like Jura very much, are you disappointed with this one because it doesn't
mm,
have the usual Jura notes, or how do you feel about that?
yeah, curious to see what you guys think, the Jura fans. Um, Brendan's getting musk sticks. Yeah, I can kind of see that a little bit. Um, uh, Leo's getting lanolin. Howard just said snap. I assume that's good. I hope that's good. Um,
Emma, is it worth
uh,
sharing the review?
yeah. If you wanted to share the review, did you send
Yeah,
it
I've
to
got it.
me? Did I? Yeah, you got it. Sweet, thank you.
Hopefully that's is that legible?
Yeah.
So when we
I
ever
can read it.
yeah, great. When we obviously put these virtual tastings together, when there's plenty of whiskies, Ben imported more malt barns than we could fit in our tasting kits. So it's always a bit of a debate. What do we showcase? And there are certain distilleries from an IB, something from Islay that's always going to work. At Ben Nevis, like, you can always name your favorites, but then when you come across a distillery that's so rare, I can only name three other IBs that have had a Jura in the last sort of 3-4 years in Australia, off the top of my head, and they've all been like 20 plus years, as Emma's mentioned. So I said we had to do it, and then we had a quick look at what Serge wrote, which is what Serge Valentine from Whiskey Fun, and he scored at 88 points, and that's just his feedback there. And this is it was like a whiskey we have to try, purely because it's just so rare, and it's actually at a really good price. So yeah, this is the reason why we included a Jura. Where you don't ever see these at tastings anywhere in Australia, not at least in the last few years. So yeah, it's a pretty special whiskey to include, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I Yeah, Leo saying, older IB Juras rock, particularly in bourbon cask. And yeah, I'm really surprised at, like, I would put this up there with the quality of some of the 20, 30-year-old Juras. Maybe like, yeah, it's got a brightness to it that you don't find in the older Jura, but it's got the flavor profile of how you would expect an older Jura to be. Really, really cool. Uh, Howard has a great question as well. What's the average age that you're buying these casks at? Like, when do you typically try and get your hands on them?
That's I can't really say, to be honest. What I can say is that casks got younger over the years. When I started, it was a lot easier to buy 20-year-old, 30, even 30-year-old casks, and you can't buy them now, really. I received an offer for 1996 Ben Nevis, and going through it all and calculating everything through, my buying price for one bottle of Ben Nevis would have been 400 euros, and that was the last time I sold a bottle for 400 euros. So that's something. I mean, 96 Ben Nevis, you can probably buy it. You could buy it if you wanted to spend the money, because the quality is most probably very good. But what if something is not working, Or what if people say, "Oh, I don't want to buy it. I don't want to spend that much money." And of course, the selling price would have been a lot higher than the buying price, because then everything else would, so you can't buy these casks anymore. So what I'm doing is, or what I did was, I bought casks, a couple of casks in the last couple of years. I didn't buy almost anything in the last 2 years, or two years. And I simply wait. As I said, the Jura is an exception. Sometimes you can get something that is ready to bottle, but for the most part, you simply have to wait. You have to have something like a balance between stuff you can bottle immediately or relatively soon, and stuff you simply have to wait for. And I bought one cask of bottled stock last year. So that's what you can do as well. But of course, these are expensive as well, and the prices go up. So yeah, it's a bit of a mix of everything. And probably casks are going to get a little cheaper again. That's probably, well, that's the impression you can get. But as I said, the older stuff, 20 plus years, will probably never get any cheaper. And that's, of course, most of the time, that's what's more interesting than a 5 or 6 or even 10-year-old. So yeah, it's a bit of, it's a bit of everything, and checking things out. But yeah, that's what I'm here for, really. So it's no problem, as long as I find something that I can come up with. And the next series will have another 7 whiskies and 2 cognacs. That's what I can say.
Yeah, amazing. Well, we might move on to whiskey number 3, one that I always know is a never fail distillery for me, Glen. And Hugh has a great question as well. Do you have a single location for the casks, or do you work with a couple? I know that, having been to Scotland now, I know there's quite a lot of warehouses that do storage of casks for bottlers. I think there's like one in Glasgow and one like further up near Dundee or something. Do you work with multiple ones, or are they all in one warehouse?
No, I work with multiple ones, simply because I don't have enough casks for to have an own warehouse, and um, multiple warehouses are the easiest choice, so to speak, because when you buy casks, they are at different locations. I could send them all to one location, but then you would have um, um, other costs involved, transport costs involved. So mostly, I just leave them at the location where I buy them from, or where they are when I buy them, because that's simply the easiest thing.
Cool. I will say as
Uh,
well, yeah,
yeah,
tell us about the Glen.
yeah. Geary is one of the whiskies that has definitely improved in the last couple of years. Glengarry had a soap problem, same as Bowmore in the past, not in the 70s, but in the 80s, and this has definitely improved a lot. It's very hard to come across a bad Glengarry now, I think. Matures very well. It's relatively fat. Um, um, yeah, you can bottle them at a pretty young age, and also already have a lot of taste in it because of the fatness. This is from a bourbon cask as well, 14 years, 53%. And yeah, I like I think it's very full-bodied and mouth coating, and very clean and pretty sweet. That's what I think. And let me check what else I have: mirabelles and honey, and green apples. That's what I have in this.
Yeah, Michael got baked apple and Leo got stewed apple. I'll add another apple to that mix. I'm getting that apple strudel, like that pastry, that when you get that like pastry that's been soaked through with the cinnamon juice from the apple as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, gorgeous. Ollie's getting a lot of sweetness coming through. Travis, lovely, chewy, robust, tropical Glengarrier. I'm also getting a touch of saltiness, which might be my brain interpreting that like fatty, like salted butter quality to it, and maybe that kind of that tone. I've been baking a lot recently, so it's all like cream icing. But yeah, superb. Scott nails it with fantastic mouthfeel on this whiskey. And yeah, like you said, it's really hard to find a bad Glengarry, particularly in an IB. I find that predominantly it's independently bottled when it's in bourbon cask or refill cask or that kind of vibe. Their core range is heavily sherry casked. Is that kind of
Oh, is it? Okay.
yeah, so I know that the 15 and the 16-year-old core range, last time I checked and saw them, they've got quite a significant berry chunk to them. So I'm always kind of curious as to why there's such a disparity between the OB and the IB bottlings of Glengarry. It's always kind of been odd because I'm like, oh, I'd pick an IB. The core range is good, but I'd pick an IB first, so why aren't they doing more bourbon casks? So
Yeah,
yeah, it's
that's
interesting.
maybe true with Jura as well. You wonder what they are doing with their own bottlings, with the distillery bottlings, when you compare them to other stuff on the market. Strange enough, I don't know how they do it really.
Yeah,
But this
it's
is
super
yeah, I like this
interesting.
one.
Yeah, I do think the branding for Jura, it doesn't quite know who it is. There was that period of time where it was all like this superstition and ancient
Yeah,
Egyptian symbols and this like real mystical. They had the Omen release, I think, and some other things. It was very confusing. I'm like, it's cool, but why? I feel the
yeah.
same way though
It's a bit
when
like
Bruichladdich decided to use Greek words on their Octomore bottles with the Dialogos series. I was like,
okay.
why? Who is Greek here?
Yeah, it's a bit like with Highland Park, who exaggerated as well. I mean, Vikings are, the part of the heritage maybe, but they just, I mean, that they had in the end they had white bottles or something. Well,
Yeah,
yeah,
ceramic bottles and yeah,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
taking to that extreme. I think that it kind of makes sense for somewhere like Orkney where it is that kind of in between
Mhm.
Scotland and Scandinavia and there's like a lot of the history. Howard says it's called branding, yes, but not all branding is good branding.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's I think it's always really interesting to kind of see what they think sticks. I mean, like I think the Bruichladdich guys were saying, we went with dialogos because it's dialogue in Greek, unsurprisingly.
Mm.
And it's just like it's about creating a conversation. I think that's a great idea. Whiskey is a conversation. It's best shared with people and talking, but why it had to be in Greek, I don't know. But yeah. Leo really likes Jura's new branding. I agree. I think that it's a little bit more true to form. And
Yeah.
yeah, Glengarry is really interesting. Like Travis says, it's the same owners as Bemore, Beam Suntory, but people
Yeah.
forget that it belongs to Beam Suntory. Uh, I feel like Glengarry and Ardmore are the less loved siblings of that family. But phenomenal whiskeys, just gorgeous stuff.
Yeah. Strange enough, Auchentoshan is the third Morrison distillery, and they never had a problem with soap like Bowmore or Glengarry had. So nobody. Oh, I have yet to find out why this was the case. I was in Scotland last year, and I met with Jim McEwen, who was responsible for Bowmore and for Glengarry for a certain time as well. And he just said, well, all the soap never really happened. People just say it did. And I said, well, that's not really true because I, uh, I experienced it myself. But yeah, he wasn't willing to discuss that any further.
Yeah, I think that soap note is interesting. I'm not as offended by it, that like kind of potpourri soapy quality. I suspect it goes back to the Morrison family. Because the Morrisons had a hand in Glengarry and Bamore, and I don't know if they were
Mm.
as involved with some of the other distilleries. So I don't know. That would be my, and the condenser running hot during a period would be my only
Yeah,
suspicion.
probably.
But of course, they're not going to be like, yes, it's a thing. They're going to be like, soap, never heard of her. Yeah. But I just think that, yeah, modern Glengarry at all ages is just vibrant and
I'm
bright.
just reading Hugh's comment. I've had a few soap whiskies. I wonder if it was a style people were fond of, and in fact, I met people who really liked it, and there has to. I mean, Bowmore had a pretty much 10 years of soapy whiskies, and they still sold it. So there must be a taste for it. I really dislike it, but yeah, it's of course you will find people who like it.
Yeah. That's the thing at the end of the day. I was reading something a master blender was saying, and it's like there is a whiskey out there for everyone. And some of those people
Absolutely.
like soap and all of that
Yeah.
kind of flavor profile. But we'll move on to whiskey number 4, I'm thinking. Speaking of,
Mhm.
dream 1996 Ben Nevises that we will never get again for an affordable price, sadly. We got a slightly more affordable, I imagine, Ben Nevis 12-year-old.
Mhm. Yeah, but Nevis is another one of these whiskies that made a real career. I mean, 96 and 97 and 8 have a very good reputation. But if you remember the normal 10-year-old or the distillery bottlings that came for a long time, those were really wacky. They had off notes, and you never knew what you would get really. And if you compare that to nowadays Ben Nevis, it still has some sort of a strange note in it, but that's very very much in the background, I think. And in the foreground is a very clean, fruity, oily spirit. Uh, I, I don't think you can even compare it to the 2000s, maybe starting of the 2010s. That was a completely different world. And then what was his name, the distillery manager that died a couple of years ago, Colin. He probably made a lot of things right and put it back on track. I remember when my first year in Scotland was 97, and I was there for a number of years or following years. And every time you visited Ben Nevis at the end of the 90s and beginning of 2000s, you wondered whether they would ever clean up the place. Or it was worse than Springbank, really. So not a really nice place. So the whiskey somehow fitted into that, and this is absolutely no comparison to it. So this is a big improvement. And yeah, as I said, I think it's very nice, very fruity, oily, bourbon cask as well. And yeah, on a good way.
Yeah, it's kind of got a little touch of that. Those old Ben Nevises for me, particularly the core 10-year-old, always gave me like caramel popcorn type of notes.
Mm.
This is leaning a little bit popcorny as well, which I love. Um, as Ollie rightly says, Ben Nevis is our favorite Japanese Scotch. But yeah, I think that it is such like an interesting, characterful spirit. Uh,
Mm.
just kind of like a baseline, and yeah, just beautiful. Mm. Mm. Um,
Oh,
Chris,
it says it's the best of the four. Okay, very
yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
Good.
Howard has a type for whiskey, funky whiskey. Brendan felt it needed a bit of water. I kind of agree. It's kind of got a little bit of that, strength to it that perhaps the other ones didn't. Chris got the caramel right away. Michael S is not getting any funkiness with this Ben Nevis on the nose, but gets a small bit on the palate. Super
Yeah, I
different to
agree.
other Ben Nevises. Yeah. I think so too. I think that it's just it's quite a chunky spirit. It's got a lot of weight and body to it. And I
Yeah.
think that that kind of quality is what lends itself to funkiness in some releases and sweetness in others. It's a mystery one. Mm. I will say as well, the Ben Nevises that were released, the core 10-year-old Ben Nevises that were released in 2018, 2019, um, uh, before it got discontinued briefly for like a hot second. A lot of that did have older Ben Nevis stock into it. That kind of opened up right before Japan changed their regulations around could and couldn't be called Japanese whiskey. And so the owner of Ben Nevis was like, which was Nikko Whiskey Company, was like, ah, crap, we can't keep shipping Ben Nevis overseas to put into our releases, because I know that from what I heard from a rep at the time, they were shipping tankards of Ben Nevis whiskey to Japan, which is why they were canceling the core range, because they didn't have enough whiskey at the distillery to bottle Ben Nevis. But with the change of regulations, now they've returned back to the core range, which is fantastic to see. But either way, means more indie bottled Ben Nevis for us, hopefully, over the next few years. Mm. Mm. Yeah, Michael K is getting a touch of grain, like a damp, chewy grain. Leo's super clean. I would have never picked that it was a Ben Nevis. And Michael S, sweet green apples, a bit of bitterness in there too. Yeah, I sometimes get like coffee apples from a Ben Nevis every now and then, from those more like sweeter styles. But yeah, super super cool. Um, uh, Going back to kind of like how you get your hands on casks uh, and the warehouses you store them in. I'm curious. I think news just broke about the barrel investment scandal in the UK. So I'm wondering if that will mean potentially more casks coming into the secondary and broker markets that came out of this whirlwind and scandal potentially. What do you think?
Say that again. I didn't understand why you think there's more casks in the market.
Oh, so BBC announced today that there was a barrel investment fraud just happened and has imploded in the UK.
Okay.
So
Mhm.
there might be some more barrels coming into the market potentially. Is that something that might affect
Okay.
independent bottlers potentially
I
positively?
can't say really. It's I as far as I know, everybody works with their usual suppliers. You don't, you're not on everybody's list. So I don't have an overview on the whole market. I have my 6, 7 suppliers, and I haven't seen anything there. But maybe in the future, but I haven't recognized anything there. Okay, the fraud. Mhm.
Yeah, cool. I'm always curious to kind of see how how like casks come into your orbit as an independent bottler, and you know what factors tend to influence. Obviously, distilleries changing wood programs sometimes does, but yeah, you
Yes.
work with a
But
select.
sometimes it's really surprising what comes out. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, there were a couple of rins on the market, Bruichladdich rins, new make. So obviously, Bruichladdich was distilling rins in I don't know what it was. I think it was a January distillation, or was it February even? Anyways, either January or February, and these appeared for a couple of minutes and then they were gone. But that was very surprising. I mean, Bruichladdich never sells anything to brokers normally. So there's surprises here and there, but yeah, normally the situation doesn't really change that much. There's the older the stuff gets, the harder it gets to buy, and the more expensive it gets to buy. So that's, you know, sometimes I received offers for more casks, and I can't even remember the prices because it's just, you know, these are they're so expensive that you just look at them like, okay, forget about it. I remember the Ben Nevis because that was, yeah, pretty much matched my selling price, and now it would be a buying price. That's why I remember it. Other than that, there's no real surprises at them. Yes, there's probably a few more casks coming, but most of the time they're not interesting for me because it will be a 2020 distillation or even younger, and yeah, that takes too long until it's good for me.
Well, speaking of Bruichladdich and old,
Mhm.
I think
Yeah,
that's kind of a perfect segue into whiskey number 5, which is both of those things. So this is a Bruichladdich, or is it closer to a Port Charlotte, or is there kind of a naming convention when you get Bruichladdich? Can you kind of align it with how
yeah, you can always identify it immediately. It reads Bruichladdich or Port Charlotte or anything else. This is a Bruichladdich really, but there is indeed a little peat in this one, but that's fairly normal for the first I don't know, maybe 3 years. I think there's no peat in it from 2004 onwards. But in the first couple of years, they did an experiment here and an experiment there. This is definitely normal Bruichladdich. This is from a cask from a source within the distillery. So it's from one of the employees, and it always read Bruichladdich. And I had a Port Charlotte from them as well, and that read Port Charlotte. So it's just whatever they did with it. It has some sort of a PT note. Yeah. This one is very interesting because you can really give it time. The other ones were fairly easy to drink relatively quickly. This one benefits from time. It will be different in 5 minutes and then in 10 minutes as well, which is always a bit difficult for tastings. But yeah,
maybe one day
develops
we'll do a tasting and be like,
develop.
open this one this many minutes before the tasting, and this one this many minutes before the tasting. Yeah. Hugh's got another great question. Have you had distillers request their name to not be listed on the release? I know that like sometimes it'll come as like an unmarked or like a Speyside Distillery cask or whatever it happens to be, or Highlands Distillery. Have you had people
No,
reaching out to you to be like, please don't put the name on the cask?
normally you get normally it reads on the papers what you can say. So if you act according to the papers, you don't get into trouble. The only request I had was a really funny one in a way because I had a couple of years ago I released a couple of blended malts, 1993 blended malts, and I chose what. Not sure whether it was that one, but I think it was the one that I named Epitome. And then someone came to me and said, "Hey, we've got a blended malt called Epitome. Please don't use the name anymore." But they didn't make anything out of that. I think, was it even Cadenhead? I can't really remember. It's a couple of years ago. But that's the only encounter I had with someone requesting that I don't use a name. With distilleries, uh, I've never had it, but there's a, you know, when you don't really know the origin, you just don't use it. Or you know, when there's no Talisker on the market, but if there was a Sky malt on the market, then you would never write it's Talisker because you know that they don't allow the use of the name. So yeah.
I actually, and please excuse the terrible quality photo, but I actually tasted this blended malt whiskey. I remembered the Highland Cow distinctly on it.
Yeah.
Just yeah, phenomenal, phenomenal whiskey. But yeah, interesting. It's interesting to see as well, like there are certain words that you can't put on a bottle of whiskey. So like the Scotch Whisky
Hmm.
Association says you can't put the word love on a bottle. I think it's to do with it would confuse somebody that it's being marketed as an aphrodisiac or something like that. I can't quite remember their wording, but they were like, you can't put
Yeah.
love on a bottle of whiskey because it makes promises and all this sort of stuff, and you can't do it. So, yeah, I know that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
They come up with something new every every once in a while because otherwise they get bored maybe. Or it's, yeah, I mean, you have to, before you label the bottles now, you have to send all the labels for approval to Scotland for approval, and they will, for the bottling company will forward it to the Scotch Whisky Association so they can say that's okay or not, because the bottling company doesn't know themselves. It's it changes all the time, so they have to check every label with them, which is of course ridiculous. I mean, could be so much fun to, I wouldn't want to say to do whatever you want, but it's right, font sizes and all that is pretty much ridiculous, I think.
So
Yeah.
it's a bit pedantic, I think. Just like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It's
Uh,
almost like German. The
I
Germans
wasn't
are the
gonna say
kings
it.
of all that
You
normally.
said it, not
It's,
me.
I don't get me started on this country. It's uh, well, anyway,
Well,
whiskey.
yes, the whiskey is fantastic. It's absolutely beautiful. Leah's like wondering maybe an ex-peated barrel or blended with with a little rinse, maybe Lockendall as well, like a touch of Lockendall in there.
Maybe,
Um,
yeah.
yeah,
What I really like about it is there's a fruitiness coming through, and that takes a couple of minutes. I think it gets stronger after a couple of minutes, and that's really beautiful. I think very, very laid back, nice fruitiness. Uh, yeah, that's what I think makes this whiskey really.
yeah, it's gorgeous. I definitely think like at the end of this, I'll probably go back to it a little bit later as well and kind of see if it's how it's opened up. And I encourage you guys, if you have more than one glass, to do the same. Um, Shout out to Brendan as well for the coastal salty fish rotting timber notes. I definitely the first whiff I got when I smelled it was been really into sardines at the moment. I just had this like soft sardines kind of salty fishy quality to it, which was absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah,
You came up
Michael's
with a question. Sorry, you came
yes.
up with a question. I just saw. Is there anything that the Scotch Whisky Association asks me to do on a label which I don't like? Yeah, there's a few things. Normally, it's different with this one, and I don't know why I came up with why they let me go through with it. But normally, the single malt Scotch whiskey has to be larger than all the rest of the writing on the label, which as I said, it's different with this one. I don't know why. Yeah, probably some people didn't look it up, but it's different. But that's what I don't like, and what I really don't like is the at the very bottom, the 70 cl, and the alcohol content has to be bigger than the rest of the text, which I think really destroys um, the image in a way. Um, yeah, and then there's a few regulations um, which normally it has to be. No, that's what is here distilled at a distillery. Yeah, as I said, they make things more complicated. Otherwise, like, you could just say, "Ooh, this is with this design, it looks good if you use a font size like this or that," and then they come up with something and stop you with it. But okay, you have to sort of deal with it, and it's possible. But I really like to do what I want. So that's why I always complain.
It kind of like tramples out a lot of the artistic quality of the labels, I think. I think it's it must be in their job description or something of liquor, branding, marketing bodies and associations that they have to be the fun police, and they can't do anything interesting. I know I've seen a couple of Australian beers get in trouble for having like fairy bread, which is this dessert that we were had as children, but really only adults eat it nowadays. Only adults get excited about fairy bread, and they had to take it off the beer can design because they were like, "Oh, but it advertises to children." But then they
Mm.
let slip a can that looked identical to the non-alcoholic version. So it was a whole hullabaloo. I think that they're just, I understand that they're necessary, but sometimes it's like, come on, have a little wiggle room. We're all
Mm. Yeah.
adults. It's supposed to be fun. But yeah, I fully agree with Ollie's comment. Whatever this laddie is, I like it. More of this prick, please. I agree. It is gorgeous. And from something mystery peated onto something definitely peated, we can move on to whiskey number 6, which is probably the palest sherry cask Caol Ila I've ever seen in my career.
Okay. I don't think it's that bad. Do you think it's that bad? Well, maybe.
I mean, it's not far off. It's not far off the Glengarry and the Nevis,
Oh,
but
yes, that's true.
yeah,
Yeah. Now that you say it. Yeah, but it definitely is a sherry cask. I know because this was a sherry cask from the beginning, but a very an even paler one. And I re-racked it for a couple of years into an Oloroso cask uh, that I had from Fernando de Castilla, who is the supplier, or was at least the supplier for sherry cask for Bruichladdich as well. So yeah, I know it is a sherry cask, and I think the sherry influence comes in or comes through very well, um, but not in the color. That's true.
it's not all about the color. Some people think it's all about the
Mm.
color, which is fine, but yeah, I think that this, I mean, even just smelling this on the nose is a great example of color makes no difference to the quality. Uh, this just makes me think of like American pulled pork barbecue, like uh, like that rich, sugary, sweet, savory barbecue sauce. Uh, I like Brendan instantly, bacon. That is absolutely,
Bacon, yeah.
yeah, this is incredible. Wow. Mm.
Yeah, Caol Ila is always good, really. You can use bourbon. I have no experience with wine, as I said, but bourbon or sherry, pretty much at any age, you can get something out of it. Very nice. This is a nose I could spend, I wouldn't say hours, but many minutes with, without having to try it now because the nose is so satisfying in my book.
It is. It's like smelling a whole meal. Um, yeah, absolutely incredible. I love Michael K's. For a peated whiskey, I do not hate it. I am so thrilled. I thought I hated peated whiskey for the longest time, and then I had an Octomore. I was like, so there's always a peat out there for everybody, and this is spectacular. And yeah, you're right. It's Caol Ila is Mr. Consistent. It is just always good. I think as an independent bottler, is it the kind of thing you can always buy just off spec without tasting that you feel a bit more confident with it? Or, how do you kind of how are you picking? Is it, the whole experience of tasting and sampling first as well? He's too distracted by the
Sorry,
smell.
say that again.
I was too
Sorry,
distracted.
I didn't understand the question.
No, I was just saying, Caol Ila is one of those like consistently good whiskeys. Is it uh when you're selecting, do you always sit down with samples, or is there the occasion where, like with a great Caol Ila, you can see a cask specifications and be like, "Yep, I'm gonna take that because I know that it'll." be great, no matter what, and I can tweak it. What's kind of your process there?
Caol Ila is if I had to buy one whiskey blind, it would be Caol Ila because it's always good. It can the problem with buying whiskey in the last couple of years is that because the production the production is so increased so much, they use every cask they can get, even if it's a 15th fill or something. So the problem is that with casks I bought recently, many of these are really tired and you have to re-rack them. So it's possible that you buy, for example, a Caol Ila 5-year-old, and the cask was really tired, so you have to re-rack it. But the quality is always good. So yeah, that's what I could buy or would buy blind, but it's expensive as well, of course, because everybody knows it's good.
Yeah, I can imagine that it's thank goodness there's quite a lot out there, I imagine. So there's a
Yeah,
little less fighting between people for casks, but yeah, I can imagine that there is quite a demand for Caol Ila.
yeah.
Yeah, love the tasting notes. Howard needs a steak to go with it. Absolutely. That sounds fantastic. Leo is hoping this will be on pour at the Top Shelf Canberra. I'm not quite certain the structure, but there will be some on pour in Canberra, no matter what. I'll make it happen. um, Noel's not usually the biggest fan of Caol Ila, but loves it. Leo, true peat rather than campfire smoke. Yeah, definitely. Um, few cap guns popping off on some glacé cherries. That is a magical sentence, and I totally understand what you mean. That is fantastic. Yeah, uh, very yummy. Hard to find a bad Caol Ila. Ollie, in Ollie's opinion, it's outperforming the Bruichladdich. I don't know. The laddie had a soft side to it that I really enjoyed. But
Yeah,
uh,
Scott says, going back to the Bruichladdich, it's so fruity now, and that's what I said. The longer you leave it in the glass, the more fruity it gets. And there's one question by Travis. Did Diageo put a stop to independent Caol Ila moving forward? I have not heard of that. Maybe I wouldn't be surprised because they would probably keep the stuff for them. Then again, there's so much production, not especially at Caol Ila, but uh, through all the distilleries, that there's also a lot of talk about limited warehouse spaces. So I don't know whether that would be true for Caol Ila, but yeah, I can imagine they will stop one day, but I haven't heard anything about it.
yeah, I haven't heard anything either. I know that they did like a really big renovation back in I think 2018, 2019 for a bit. But so that might have involved expanding production, but I'm not sure. I know that Diageo is selling off one of their grain distilleries, not Brig. But yeah, I don't think that I feel like the independent bottling and the cask broker market for Caol Ila is a lucrative side gig for the distillery, so I don't think it'll be going away too soon unless they really are running out of Caol Ila, which I highly doubt. They're one of the biggest distilleries on the island, so it'll be interesting. But uh, yeah. Speaking of the Laddie versus the Caol Ila debate, I might run the poll now. So I'll launch the poll. You can pick your top 2 favorite whiskies of the night. Um, so I'm excited to kind of see how they all perform. But I think let's come to it. I'm going to go back to all of these whiskies and probably drink through them, which I rarely do after a tasting. But these have been some absolutely spectacular drams. But officially, that is the end of the tasting. I want to thank Martin so much for calling in from Germany. We really appreciate you joining us, and Ben, I want to thank you for bringing this brand that I love so much into Australia. I think I used to work at Whiskey and Element, and they were bringing in a couple bottles, and I loved it, and then it disappeared, and I was like, no. So I really appreciate Ben bringing it back into Australia. And I think if there's any quick questions from anyone, including this one, lovely one, conveniently for Ben. These bottlings that are launching in April, can you give us a clue, Martin, of what we can expect here in Australia?
For the next release, the April release,
Yes.
you mean? As I said, will be 7 whiskies. One is 11 years old, one is 16 years old, and the rest is over 20. All of them are over 20, and there's 2 cognacs, which are 105 years old together. So they're both over 50. So, yeah, and there's another 4 very limited releases, which is I have a series called the 26, which will be 26 bottles, all at least 20 years old, but only 30, 40, 50 bottles each. So they're only available directly. So yeah, you probably won't have anything from that. But as I said, the regular release will have very interesting labels, and I think it's something to look forward to. Yeah.
That
2
should be
from Islay,
exciting.
maybe I could say. 2 Islay whiskies. That's what I can say as well.
Oh, super exciting. Well, I'm sure that we'll reach out to Ben to put together another virtual tasting later in the year when they land. And I will quickly launch the poll results. Drum roll insert here. And the Bruichladdich won out of the fight between the Laddie and the Caol Ila. So that is, I mean, look, a few votes off. I'm really impressed to see the Isle of Jura bottlings did really well. Oftentimes, the first whiskies get lost in the sauce, as it were, and get overlooked in favor of the later ones. But it's great to see that a lot of people were loving the Elgin and the Jura. I think Brendan was particularly keen on those. But as Ollie shared in the chat, we don't have a massive amount of bottles. For orders, email him, oliver@thewhiskeylist.com.au, and first in was dressed on the bottles, and he will do his best to hopefully get your hands on it. Go for it, Ollie. I can see you're wanting to chat.
I can very quickly, just off the top of my head, if I remember correctly, the pricing. So Bruichladdich was 560, 565-ish. The Caol Ila was 369-ish. Glen Elgin 279. Glen Geary 265. Ben Nevis 265. And the Jura Bourbon cask. I don't remember how much that one was. Sorry, that is. Have to get back to me. What was the
Fair enough.
RRP for that one, Ben, roughly?
Which one, sorry?
The Jura.
The Jura. Sorry. Jura. Where are you? They around the 200, low 200s.
Yeah.
No, 220. 220, yeah, around 220, 225, I think.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
We're a well-oiled machine between the two of us.
Yeah.
They are a price. And yeah, if you're interested in any of them, send Ollie an email and he will have all the info and whatnot for you. So yeah, that's it for our second Maltbarn tasting. I can't wait to get you back on, Martin, for the next batch that come into Australia. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. I hope you have a
Thanks
wonderful
from me
rest of
too.
the
Thank
night.
you. Thank you
Take
very
care,
much.
and we'll see you at the next
Looking
one.
Yeah, looking forward to the next time. Thank you very much.